Oh, good morning. My name is Samantha Mirabal. I'm with Mocha's application team doing our DesignShop talk today. I've got one question that was sent in ahead of time. So if you have questions, please type them in the chat. They'll pop up on my other monitor and I will have those there to be able to try to look at those, but otherwise it might be short. So if you have questions, start filling them in, and if it's getting close to me being done and you have a question, just put a wait or something and I'll chat until I can figure out, until the question comes through. That way I don't cut off the live early. All right, so I'll start with the question that was sent in ahead of time. So they embroidered this thing, had some issues using 40 weight thread and a tiny needle. Those two you can. I'll talk about that in a minute. The needle pulled up, fuzzy cutaway, and shredded the thread, so I corrected that, trimmed, reversed it, sewed, had some loops, pulled it off the machine, fixed it. Looks better, but not great. They have a few loops left right here. What do I do with it? Okay, so a few things. Going to a 65/9 needle, that's a skinny little needle, right? So that's intended for fine detail type work predominantly. When you do that, go to those tiny needles, which it can also be for different fabric types. But anyway, when you go to those thinner needles, it's typically better to go to a lighter weight thread as well. Like a 60 weight thread. Do you have to? No. Just generally, when you go smaller, you're typically going to reduce the diameter of the thread as well. When you do that, it's going to have to change the digitizing. So you can see there's a little ripple effect here. So use a thinner needle. If you use 40 weight thread, that's cool, but typically to get the full benefit of having a tiny needle, you need a thinner thread too. Okay, so if you go down to the 60 weight thread, you got to change the density because it's thinner. So let's say a 4.0 density looks beautiful with the 40 weight thread. You put a 60 weight thread, it might start looking sparse. So you have to decrease the density to add more stitches. Good morning, Beth. So, when you're talking about, smaller needles and thread size, I always, if I'm going down, I also change the thread size. But then I also have to adjust my digitizing. So as far as the loops that pulled up, what can we do about those? The job's done. We just want to finish this and be happy, right? So what do? A few things that you can try is to take a heat gun, right? So if you kind of stand those loops up so that they're, perpendicular to the surface, take your heat gun and run it this way. You got to be careful. The heat gun will melt the thread and burn it, right? So that's not exactly what you want, but it also shrinks the thread. So if the loops are up and you hit it with a heat gun and kind of just do, tap it, move it back, so you'll see it start to shrink and then it will start to melt. So there's a fine line between getting it to shrink and burning it to where it actually melts and separates the thread. So you can do a heat gun. That's always good in a pinch. I don't use these anymore, but I used to when I had a single needle machine that was really prone to looping. I always call them rasps, but it's a needle with a rough edge on it. And what you can do is you would take it and stab it through the fabric right here on that thread, and it will pull the thread to the back. Okay, you get it to the back. What do you do with it? So when it gets to the back, I would take a piece of fabric glue and tack it down and let it dry, right? That's because there's nothing saying it's not going to snag back to the front again. So that's just me. So yeah, not cutting it is good. Pulling it to the back, using a snagger, heating it with a heat gun, things like that are all good ideas to address that. Okay. But yeah, 65/9. Here's the other thing. That is a thin needle and the thread is thick. Remember, there's a slot, a groove down the front of the needle. That protects the thread as it's going in and out of the fabric, right? So if you go to a thinner needle and a thick thread, you don't get the full benefit of the thread being able to sit in that groove and be protected as it's going in. So you may end up with more snags and things like that. So like I said, can you do this combo? Yeah. I do it on occasion because I'm lazy, quite frankly, but Typically I'll do this and then change that to a 60 weight. Okay. All right, so we did give you some links, some needles, so that you have those. What's the best? We have some questions typed in. What's the best needle for a thick backpack strap? So thick backpacks, it's, you know, you got this thick material, it's got foam in it, it's pretty aggressive. You can probably, you know, again, I have 15 machines out there and I have 7511s in all of them. So I pretty much do anything I can not to start moving needles around. So if I can do a 7511, I will. So that's my baseline. In general, you probably would be better served going to a slightly thicker needle like an 80. But I try everything with a 7511 before I move it, just because then I have to keep track of where I put them. And I mentioned earlier, lazy. Anyway, so that's just kind of a me thing. But yeah, I would probably go to a 80-12 needle and just a regular 40 weight thread, and just make sure you have it nice and secure before you embroider it, that you have some nice underlay and things like that. That way it's not moving around. You've tied all the layers together and you don't get some weird effects. Okay. All right, another question typed in. I've seen a lot of quilted look applique designs. I want to make one. Let's see. I have a file that has a quilted lines for the hoop, for in the hoop quilting. How do I cut that file to fit my applique shape? Oh, that one's interesting. So I'm guessing it, all right. I'm guessing the file that you have is an expanded file. So cutting that is probably not the simplest thing in the world to do, because it's not an OFM. But here, let's play with it some. All right, you want to do it as an applique shape. So let's find Bafo. I'm just looking for a fat font. We'll do an S, make it big. I'll go to properties. Nope, I'm not going to do it that way. I'm going to do it this way. All right, so I'm going to shift click, and then I'm going to delete the letter there. All right, so now I got something to start with. Yeah, all right, so expanded. We'll talk about that in a minute, but let's start with how would you create quilted line type effect inside an applique. All right, so an applique file typically, how big is this? All right, so that's pretty good. I'm gonna say 6 inches tall, 4 inches wide, so big enough where I could do a quilted design in there and make it look cute, right? So let's turn this into an applique file first, right? So I'm gonna do it manually. You can do it using the Appliqué tool too, so it's right there. I'm just gonna do it manually because not everyone has that. So copy, paste, give it a new color. So I have my walk stitch, which is a placement. So I'd hoop my shirt or whatever I'm putting this on, I'd sew that. Then I'd lay my fabric down and I'd sew it again. So now I've got a big square sewn onto my thing. And then I'm going to copy and paste that again. Actually, I want that one to be a bean stitch. That's me, this one. I'm going to change this over into a zigzag stitch by holding my control key down and clicking on that, and then change, which is the single line center. And then I'm going to change it to a tackle. So now I got a zigzag. Then I'm going to copy and paste, move that down. I could have done that with the other, but again, control click, change that to, let's say 40. Here we go. All right, so yay, I've got me an applique file. My placement, my tack down, where I cut the fabric out, that holds it down afterwards. 20 is kind of narrow. Let's make it 30. There we go. And then my top stitch. Cool. So I have an applique file. Now we want to put decorative quilting type inside of here. So what do we do with that? So a bunch of ways to do it. I'm going to just start with this guy, and I'm going to copy and paste it and convert it over into a complex fill. Okay, so copy, paste, and then I did a control and I clicked on that. I want this after my tack down, but before my satin stitch. Okay, so from here I can change this over to a decorative, and then that decorative can be whatever design you want. There are a lot built into the software, right? So there's these leaves, there's there's these pebble thingies, bubbles. That one's kind of cute. So you can see there's a bunch of built-in ones. So there's the bubbles, there's the braids, which is kind of fun, the check circles. I mean, if you want to, oh, there's the pebbles. I like the pebbles. There's stippling in here. I think that is actually done in the properties. So instead of decorative, you can tell it to be stippling and apply that, and it will do a stippled look, right? So that's not an actual decorative, that's another stitch type here. Stippling, which is fun. And then you can, again, change all the properties with it to spread it out more or change it. So you can create a lot of fun effects with that. You can even do your own decoratives. So I show this one a lot, but it's a little big for this design. So let me make it smaller. That doesn't really work on that shape, but you can see. So this is a horse design I drew. So yeah, you do that. So you said, how would I create my own squiggle? The easiest way is just to go into that fill. Instead of it saying fill, you would come down here and tell it to be stippling, and it squiggles it all over for you, and it's really pretty. And then if you want to change the stitch angle, the density, whatever, you want it spread out more, you want it closer together, you want the stitch angle to be something different, you can rotate it around, do all kinds of stuff, right? So you can make this go however you want. Yeah, so stippling, oh yeah, the question was, sorry, I'm reading them as they come up, the questions pop up. Stippling's what I want. Is there a way to adjust how large the pattern is? Yeah, that's the density right here. So you can see I can make it bigger or smaller just by changing the density on it. So stippling's a lot of fun. That horse pattern that I quickly showed, I'll make us just so you can see it. So if I take just a square and I change that to decorative, horse, there. And then I can play with the spacing on it and move it around as much as I want, right? So I can create decoratives myself. So how do you create your own decoratives? I'm just gonna go pull that one up for simplicity. Decoratives, where is it? Oh, bubble mask, that one's fun. Anyway, sorry. Oh, I forgot I did that one. Where's horse? There it is. All right, I'm just pulling it up here so I don't have to redraw it. All right, so when you're creating your own decoratives, you draw whatever it is you want, okay? This is what I drew. The starting point there, the ending point there. The only thing with decoratives is your start and stop have to be on the same horizontal line, right? So that has to be on the same line here. If you don't do it on the red line, that's fine. It doesn't have to be there. You can do a guideline and put it on guidelines. You can use the grid and make it match the grid. It doesn't matter. It just has to be on the same horizontal line. Okay? Delete that. Once you do that, you select your shape. If it's multiple shapes, select them all. Right click, save custom shape, tell it to be a decorative, give it a name. I always save as test and test one and bounce back and forth so that I'm not filling up my decoratives with a whole bunch of junk. So like, let's say I do this and I go, oh, that didn't work. Let me go make some edits. I don't want to have horse 1, horse 2, horse 3, horse 4, horse 10. I want my final. So I just keep overwriting test, and when I'm happy, then I save it off as my final name. Okay? And that's all. Let's see. Okay. I'm scrolling back up the questions because I'm realizing there's some other things in there. All right, so yeah, we talked about the stippling, adjusting it, how to create your own decoratives if you are so inclined. All right, and then there was another comment on my prior question on the backpack straps, that they're being too thick and a 7511 was just too big for it, or we're having problems, right? So when you're going through thick things, you tend to get more flex with the needles. So going up in size will help fix that, right? So going to an 80-12 and maybe a 90. I really wouldn't go higher than a 90 personally. But, all right, scrolling back up. Let's see. All right, so Nicole, hopefully, oh, you're expanded. Okay, I did not cover that. So if I have this, all right. I'm going to change this to stippling. And operation. All right, I'm going to copy. I was trying to make this into a stipple pattern that's expanded. All right, so copy, new file, paste, center it, file, save as, expanded stitch type. Let's do that one. It doesn't really matter. No, I don't want it there. See. Where's my Dropbox? It's annoying. Sorry. I just don't want to save stuff all over my computer because then I get mad later when I find it. Wondering why I put random stuff in random spots. Okay. Cool. I have an expanded file. No, we're not saving it anymore. Alright, so I'm going to delete that. I'm going to delete this thing. I'm going to insert that file I just created, which is expanded. Alright, so this guy here is just a whole bunch of points. Options you have, right? You can convert this to operations, convert to wireframe, right? And once it's a wireframe, it did it as a running stitch. So now I'm going to have to go and figure out all the points to delete. You can do it. Would I like to do that? Not really, right? But that's one way. You literally would come through here and I would do it like this. Looking at my S, I would do large swatches and hit delete. And notice it's going to have stuff I have to clean up along the edge. So when you do conversions like this, it works, but, and however, you are going to have stuff to clean up, okay? So you can do it that way. Undo, undo, undo. So that's using converting it. If you leave it expanded, it's the same deal. I can come over here and turn on expanded so I see the stitches. I can come over to custom point selection. And then I can sit here and start deleting stitches. And I usually do broad swatches of this. And then I go clean it up later. Again, what I showed you earlier is way more fun than this. All right. But, I mean, you can, if this is what you got to work with, then we work with what we got, right? So, there we go. Anyway, so I could continue running around here deleting all those stitches, and it would then be within there. Okay? So, yeah, that is an option. Not one I like doing, but some might. All right, I'm going to delete that because that's ugly. All right, let's see. Let me go back up to the top. What should I use for a Carhartt blanket? How thick are those? I haven't sewn on them. I know Carhartts are really thick in general. So if the blankets are anything like that, I probably would use a magnetic hoop. If it's super thick and the magnet is starting to pop away, sorry, I have clamps. Yeah. In my junk room here, sorry. These are too big. I use these but I have a smaller version of these that I got from Home Depot. These I use for my printer back there, but I've got smaller ones that I use when I have a really thick item in a hoop and it's pulling the magnet down. I'll actually just clip these on the edge, and those things are stupid aggressive and don't let it pop. So I tend to do that when I have heavy items that are giving me grief with the magnet hoops. Okay, so if that is that thick, just if you're going to do stuff like that, this is a physical item that can bang into the head. All right, when you hit the head or hit needles with items, not good things can happen. So be very cautious when doing stuff like that it's not behind it to be able to push the head off. It's very similar like if you're using any of the clamps and you leave a clamp up and it hits the back of the needle case, you're going to pop the head off. So you don't want to do that. So that's, if you're going to do things like this, use caution. As far as what needle on a Carhartt, probably going to an 80. Like I said, I start everything I do with a 7511. It is just my go-to, period. I always start there, and the minute I have problems, I go, I know better than this, and I put the larger needle in, or the smaller needle, depending on what I'm working on. So that is what I would do. I would do a 7511 as a starting point. I'd probably use magnet hoops, making sure that if it's particularly with blankets, a lot of them have multiple layers, that they're lined up and it's hooped straight down and there's no shift between the layers, because that becomes annoying later. Have a decent running stitch as a starting point to hold everything together onto the stabilizer, and then I just embroider it. Okay, that would be my suggestion, Sherry. All right, so let's see. Do I run sharps or ballpoints most of the time? Personally, I use ballpoints, even in scenarios where I shouldn't, like hats. Hats will always run better with sharps, but I start them with ballpoints, and if it sews, I smile and move along. But again, it's because I just don't want to change needles every 2 minutes. Not that it's hard to change needles, and I should get over it, but that's just, like I said, that's a me thing. That's not a best practice. The best practice is change to a sharp and move along. So, like I said, I'll try a ball, and it's literally the first sign that it's doing something silly that I know better, I'll immediately switch to a sharp. Like, I won't fight with it. Like, I won't, out of stubbornness, continue using the ball, even though I know I should be using a sharp. I'm not that, but I'll try it. All right, so let's see. Did that, we talked about that. I would like to learn how to sew puff lettering. What type of letters would you recommend I purchase? I have a Melco Bravo. So if you want to sew puff letters, they specifically have to be digitized for puff. If you have DesignShop, there is a puff font in here. Let's see, like that one. So this one is specifically digitized for puff already. And then if you go into the properties and change the style to be puff alphabet for that selection, it will apply all the properties to make it sew nicely as puff, right? So you can use this puff font, which includes these capped ends. So the stuff down here, these are capped ends, and that's what cuts that puff. Because if you just sew this way without that right there, you'll end up with puff hanging out here without any needle penetrations to cut it, so it won't sew very well, right? So the fonts themselves have to be digitized. We have a whole bunch of videos on digitizing for puff, about, capping the ends or pinching the ends, your two options. This is what I'd call a cap. Pinch is where you take the stitching and you run it down to a point so that you have needle penetrations on all sides of your element, because without that, you're not cutting the puff, right? So that's where I would start off with. I would start with the built-in fonts you have, play around with it. If you're going to go buy letters, you need to specifically look that it was digitized for puff. Okay, because without it being digitized for puff, it's not going to sew right, because it needs a lower density, it needs the capping, the pinching. There are techniques you have to use to make it sew well. Okay, so Marcy, does that help any? Yeah, and we did get you a link to 3D, some resources on puff embroidery in the comments, so check those out too. All right, we did the stippling. We talked about that. Okay, I think I've caught up on all the questions so far. Yeah, Marcy, great. Hopefully that helps. I'm just scrolling back to make sure I didn't miss any other questions. Did that, yeah. Okay, sweet. All right, any other questions before I call it a day? If you have a question, just hit something in the comments so I know to wait. Otherwise, I'll show you. Don't forget, we have a form out here where every week, if we're not live, let's say right after we're done, you go, oh, I should have asked about ABC or whatever it is. Or in the middle of the night, you're thinking about something, or in the middle of a work day, you come across an issue and you want to go ahead and just type it out so that it's there for later. Right here, you can fill in a form. It'll submit it to a spreadsheet where next time I go to create those questions that are sent in ahead of time, that's where I get them from. Okay. So yeah, fill out those questions. What is the largest mighty hoop I run? I bought one that requires special arms. I don't use it often because it requires special arms. And then they came out with another one that is nearly full sew field, and I have that one out there, and I don't know what size it is. Let me see if I can find it in DesignShop. Let's see. Yeah, Beth, 98% density. You'll hear me say this pretty often. I don't use percent densities ever. I always switch it over to standard. The percents, they make me crazy because I would rather just set the numbers. There is a point to it, but that's just me. Let's see. Let me see if I can find that hoop. Mighty hoop. What is, oh, these are all the ones it's written on the hoop and it's out in my shop. I'd have to run out there and look at it. Let's see. Or if someone on Melco, do you know what that big, nearly full sofa, it's the big one with the brackets kind of embedded in it. When it came out, Scott and I had lots of discussions about it. Maybe that one? Maybe? Let's see. Apply. Okay. Wait. Maybe that one? Nope, that's not it. Well, that one's a good one too, but I'll have to look it up for you. They make a big hoop still. I'll have to find it. The special arms, I got them from Melco when they were still being made for the really massive one. And then Midwest Products, who makes the Mighty Hoops, they had a stock of them for a while. And then Embroidery Systems Canada, which is the Canadian Melco distributor, they had them for a little bit. I don't know who has stock of those. The ones they're these big brackets that are made for, they were originally made for the sash frame, which isn't made anymore. So that's what those are. They were made for the sash frame, and they basically take the arms way wide. So I know Melco doesn't make them anymore, except they do make the XL hoop, and those come with things. So that's a fun hoop as well. It's not, so that is another option. But I'll have to look up, or next time I go out there, I'll find it and post for you guys what that other big hoop is. Ah, hey, Melco corrected me. Apparently the wide hoop arms are still available. So awesome. That's in the chat. So that's awesome. All right. What other questions? Yeah, but the magnet hoop I'm thinking of gives you near full sew field, and the sew field is what, roughly 15 by 15. It's not that, but it's something like that. Okay, any other questions before I call it a day? All right, Nicole, awesome. All right, well, if we have no more questions, I will be back next Thursday. So I'll see what questions you guys might have and try to get those answered. Don't forget to type them in the form anytime so I have them next time. And how do I get add my Mighty Hoops into DesignShop? So right here is the display current hoop button. If it works the same in V10, right click on it, come down here, not that button, sorry, customize hoop list, and then here you can go through and find the hoops you want. If your hoop database is super old and you're using a newer hoop, oh, that's cool. Anyway, you can go install the hoop database associated with fast frames, and that will give you the more hoop options under the customized hoop list, right? Oh, there's the full sew field. Anyway, so for the fast frames, if you go to Melco-service, Down here should be fast frames, and down here is hoop installation for older software. So there's other places you can get this. That's just the quickest way I know to show you. And there's a link on updating your hoop database. So yeah, it's not going to show up in the drop down right here until you actually customize the list. So click on that, go through and select what hoops you actually have. I tend to only select the ones that I use. Yeah, I use that. Yeah, I'm gonna turn that one off. I don't use it that much. So anyway, that way I'm not sorting through a list that's 2,000 long and not in alphabetical order just to make me mad. Can you guys start adding the comments to the video after it's posted? They do show, all the comments do show up on the video at some point. I don't know how YouTube does that, but I know they stay out there for ever and ever because I see them later. So I don't know. I don't know. Maybe someone, whoever's helping me over in Melco said the links are only on the live. They should stay there forever. So I don't know about that. I'm not a YouTube fan. I just stream, or, all right, I like YouTube. I do not know much about it. I just stream there. I stream and watch. That's about it. So I don't know the details on how that works, but maybe someone at Melco knows. Maybe it's a setting, or maybe they're there. I don't know. All right, what other questions do we have? We'll look into that now, Nicole. Anything else? All right. All right, well, you guys have a fantastic weekend. Have some fun sewing. Do cool things. I know the school season. Are these posted somewhere else, these videos? Yeah, they're on Facebook too. So they're on YouTube, they're on Facebook. If you go look at the past episodes, so again, if you go to the Melco service site, go to the FAQ, and then go to DesignShop, and right there is all the DesignShop Talk episodes. If you scroll down, there's links to all the video on YouTube, the video on Facebook, and then somebody really nice types everything we talked about here, so you can get to them that way as well. So yeah, they're on both YouTube and Facebook, and the comments are posted both places. Kind of. If a question gets posted on YouTube, it's not, that same question isn't posted on Facebook. So, but any comments that Melco makes are posted on both always. All right, any other questions? Awesome. Yeah, the one thing that I really like about the list here, if you look, I've been doing these for a really long time. So if you're looking for content, if you do a Control F and you type whatever it is you're looking for, you can see Puff's been mentioned 61 times, right? So you can go through and, you know, look at whatever was covered and decide and scroll through them and go, huh, that, you know, that video sounds interesting. I don't know, whatever it is. So you can go watch those particular episodes. Okay. Sherry asks, any tips for sewing on fleece? Fleece is kind of a puffy material. So I find it doesn't tend to eat lettering or eat your designs as much as other things do, like furs. But because it has some loft, depending on what you're working on, you can benefit from like a knockdown stitch or a primer underlay. So those sorts of things you can create yourself right here using this primer thing and do like a, I don't know, whatever offset you want. And it will do a, you know, it's basically a global underlay to sew down that loft so that when your top stitching goes in, it sews well, right? So because there's so much loft on it, if you don't use this, you need to make sure you have decent underlay, right? And that you use, I would suggest a topper for sure. Without the topper, as the stitching is going in, that loft will mess with your stitches. So by putting a topper on there, it holds it all nice and stable so that you get nice clean stitching rather than the texture of the fabric moving your stitches around, making it look goofy, right? So that's upping your actifeed a little bit. Thicker materials typically require a higher actifeed, so that's always a good thing to do. How would we show a customer all the fonts in DesignShop? Show you how I do it. So I go right here and say print all, and then I really don't want to do this, but and then I save it off as a PDF. So I don't want to do it. Let me go find it for you and show you. Let me go open up the actual PDF to show you. There you go. So that'll actually create a PDF that looks like this. And I actually give this to my clients and say, there you go. All the fonts you could want to see, here they are. Right? Milko they just posted a link. It says it has the fonts. Where are the fonts? Oh, right there. Oh, look at that. They already did it for you. So you don't even have to print it yourself. Here they are. Cool. So there's right there. So you can either create it yourself or just go send them to this one. So Ace Monogram, that's kind of the options you'd have there. I know I print my own because there's a few fonts that just for what I do, I don't like using. So I delete those from my PDF so they don't know they exist. All right, let's see what else. Is that Dritz tool better than using an embroidery needle? I mean, it's got a rasp on it. An embroidery needle, you're going to have a hard time pushing that thread through. So that rough spot will pull it through. Pretty much anything you can do to hook it to the back is all you need. I've been known to just use my fingernail and scratch at the area until I can grab something from the back that I can pull on. But like I said, I don't have a problem with that anymore. It was mainly when I had my single needle, I would always get loops. So I used that rasp a lot when I was doing it because it was simple. I just shove it from the front to the back and the thread would be on the back. So, all right. Okay, awesome. Any other questions? Hey, that's exciting. Managed to talk for 40 minutes from only having one question ahead of time, so I like it. All right, y'all. I am going to call it a day. I will talk to you again next Thursday. So send your questions ahead of time. So if you need examples made, I can make them. If not, we'll do it again live. All right. Until next time, have fun. Bye, everyone. Thanks for joining.